You got me! I'm a serial offender as in swearing. You have been warned. Content is not suitable for all listeners. Welcome. You're listening to Bewitched Banter.
I'm Krista, and I believe that people are inherently shitty.
And I'm Amy, and I tend to believe that people are naturally good.
But ironically, I'm a super believer in the supernatural and all things spiritual.
And I'm a total skeptic.
We're best friends, and in this podcast, we're seeking to explore and understand each other's perspectives with deep dives into the spooky, the spiritual, the magical, and the mystical.
And some straight up spoofs.
Today, we are covering serial killers and the supernatural for Witching Hour Story Time.
Cheers!
Cheers!
Okay, so I feel like mine's a long one, but I think I said that last time and it wasn't even that long, so we'll see.
Mine's long and dark. Go figure.
Well, the subject is serial killer, so I would be very weirded out if you're like, it's a lighthearted one.
Yeah, good point, friend. And also, side note, sorry listeners if my history of serial killers was a little academic, but I just wanted to at least show you all how they're
smart categorized. You are? You're just trying to flex on us?
I'm flexing on my exes and my mind flexing. Okay, no. No, I got a little academia because I started teaching this week, so maybe that's where my brain was at, so my bad. Anyway, enjoy Amy's story. Hopefully.
It's not very academic. I'm the dumb one of the group.
Oh, stop.
I am going to be covering the murderer Sean Sellers, which Krista, obviously, we discussed earlier. She has an issue of listening to murder stories.
Yeah.
Every single night. That was an intervention. It was a light one.
My name is Krista, and I'm a true crime addict.
I was surprised that Krista hasn't heard this one. She hasn't stumbled across it in her nightly ritual of listening to murder. But I thought it'd be a good one to cover for that reason. And this story really piqued my interest because I found headlines lovingly calling Sean the devil child.
Okay.
Which I, as a teacher, used to call lots of children the devil child.
What are names you'll never name your kids because of that being devil childs?
Children.
Cooper?
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a dog's name.
I'm trying to think what else. You know what? I probably blacked them out as a way of survival. I mean, I probably, as we go along, I could probably think of several names.
Gotcha.
But it turns out his nickname wasn't from the press, but came from the inmates he spent time with while he was on death row.
Oh, boy. And
we wouldn't remember this story at all because it all happened in 1986, so before our time.
Okay, yes. Well before.
And the story, I'm going to call him Sellers, became really a focal point of the media for two main reasons. First, this was during the Satanic Panic, and people were highly aware of cases that involved murder and Satanism.
Yep, covered that.
And I kind of felt like this, I didn't mean to do this, but it kind of perfectly aligns with last week's episode because it covers Satanism a lot.
Okay.
Which I thought was kind of cool because the take on Satanism on this episode and this story is really dark. Where last episode, if you listen, which I highly encourage you to, is very different. We talk about where Satanism is more about people who, it's like a practice of centering yourself and putting yourself first. So we know, and we know that Satanic Panic's happening now. And also it became a huge conversation and talking point because people were weighing in with their opinions if they believe juveniles should face the death penalty when they committed heinous crimes such as murder.
Okay. Wow.
And I do want to have this conversation, but maybe we should table it for after I'm finished telling my story because I'm kind of curious to see what your opinion is on the death penalty.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, she's going with capital punishment. Oh, God. Here we go. I'm very conflicted in a nutshell, but we can get into it after.
Yeah, that's how I am. I will say that, and we can get into it, but I, to be honest, don't have any strong opinions because it's such, every case-by-case basis is not black and white.
Right. That's exactly how I feel, girl.
And even this story, I'm curious to see at the end of it from what I gathered and found how you feel about it at the end.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious to see. It sounds like we're very aligned, but I do know I'm conflicted because on one hand, the heinous things that people do, I say, yeah, fuck yeah, kill them. But then what if they're wrongfully convicted? So yeah,
Yeah, and I think it's hard for me to weigh in too, because if it was a loved one, it would change everything.
Absolutely.
But let me get into it and we'll talk about it a little bit more. So I think this is a really interesting talking point, and I wish I had more established opinions, but it's so hard to make these opinions with, I don't know, life and death is extreme. Like, ending someone's life is very extreme. But there's a limited information on his childhood. I couldn't really find much, but he came from a broken home, and it sounds like to me he was passed on from family member to take care of him. So really no stability. But I also found contradicting reports on his childhood because you don't know who it's coming from. Is it coming from his family members or his version of the truth, which we're going to talk about at length. And I don't know if the research or the people writing it were kind of trying to say, romanticize who he was in the past. But they described him as like an all-American boy with blonde hair, blue eyes, and always got good grades.
Okay.
So, yeah, you're a normal kid. His parent, well, he's not normal, but
I was like, wait.
He's a normal kid. He went to school. He got married, lived a normal life. Real boring story. His parents described him as being perfect, which
Ew.
I'm not buying.
Fuck
And
out.
if any parent is describing their child as being perfect, you are enabling your child for bad behavior.
Absolutely. Preach.
Because you got to look at your child with a realist lens. And Sellers was supposedly introduced to Satanism at the age of 8 from his babysitter.
I thought you were going to say baby mama. I was like, he's 8.
And this is kind of where I wrote a note. I was like, what whack-ass babysitter is like, hey, do you want to watch The Lion King or do you want to like learn about Satanism tonight? Because I was a babysitter and I did not have those kind of conversations.
You didn't say, yo, kids, let's watch Satan Panic.
Yeah. You know who the devil is? You want to go to bed tonight?
You're going to learn a day.
Yeah. But after this introduction to Satanism, he started collecting books on black arts. Supposedly, he would hold ritual services, including bloodletting, and he had orgies, and he would keep vials of his blood, which he would supposedly drink at school.
Ew. At 8 years old?
Older.
Like
we're older
teens?
now, teenage
at
this point.
Ugh.
And his classmates had been interviewed, several of them, after his incidents I'll get into.
Okay.
But they recall him bringing a satanic Bible to school, and he would talk about demons flying around and influencing his decisions. And at one point, this is like the weird kid.
I'm so confused. Like, what?
And this is like the weird kid you wanted to avoid. Everyone had
one
those
of those
kids.
too, huh, in your class? You had several of those in your classes, huh?
Yeah. Did you have any?
Thankfully, no, since I never taught K through 12. So, in college, yeah, there's some weirdos, but like...
Oh, I thought I meant growing up.
Oh, growing up. Oh, hell yeah.
I remember one guy, he wrote...
Yes, I did.
This is so dumb, but I remember one guy, everyone thought he was going to kill people at school, so I gave him a friendship rock.
Hey, that's proactive safety, girl. Proactive safety measure.
First of all, who wants a friendship rock? I mean, what was going through my head?
Oh my god. Isn't Billy Madison where he's like crossing off the names in lipstick of like all the people he's gonna murder who were mean to him in oh my god.
This is going over my head again.
Yeah, girl.
Movies, TV
God
shows.
Damn it, American pop culture, Amy. Get with it. Get with the 90s times.
No, but I did have, as a teacher, being an art teacher, actually... Kids would show me the most disturbing drawings.
Oh, God.
Sean's claiming he's a Satanist, but he's never actually attended a Satanist like temple or church.
Okay.
And he basically had his own branch of Satanism. Attendance of 1, I'll say.
Oh, Jesus.
Yes. So very small attendance.
Okay.
And
do you, boo-boo? Stand up there on your own, buddy.
Yeah. And the funny part is that he considered himself a high priest even though he had no followers.
Okay, so self-proclaimed leadership.
Yeah, and he said he was Satanist, but again, it's him practicing by himself, creating his own version. Yeah.
Why don't we ordain ourselves as high priestesses right now?
What would our branch be called? Bewitched Satanist?
Oh! We on the same page with that.
I mean, that was a little too easy.
Yeah, it was on the nose.
On September 18th, 1965, Sean Sellers and his best friend at the time, Robert Howard, killed a convenience store clerk, Robert Bauer, in Oklahoma City.
Okay.
And so to make this easy, I'm going to call Howard is the killer. Bauer almost rhymes, I feel like.
It does.
It's making it even more confusing because there's two Roberts. Bauer is the convenience store clerk, okay? So Sean Sellers later on confessed that he killed Bauer because he refused to sell him beer. And so let's keep in mind that at the time, Sellers and Howard are only 16 years old. So Bauer was following the law.
Mm-hmm.
So Sellers and Howard left the convenience store pissed off. And Robert Bauer, didn't think anything of it. So he's casually sipping a cup of coffee. He looks over and he sees Sellers and Howard come back to the store. Sellers and Howard decided to murder Bauer for no other reason. Sellers confessed because he wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone.
Wow.
And Bowers died from the result of a gunshot, but it sounded like, from what I gathered, that he was attacked first. Like, he was beaten down, then they shot him. From what I gathered. I couldn't find too many details. And Robert Bauer was laid to rest at only 35 years old, so he's really young.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so truly sickening. And Sean Sellers, in a journal entry that I'll discuss at length how it became public online, he wrote about it, and he was laughing almost, and he said he committed the crime and wrote, quote, "It was like a fantastic prank since he had no clue we were there for him."
Wow.
So this shows you the depths of what a truly sick person Sean Sellers is.
Yeah. No remorse, no context of human life.
Yeah, and it's going to get even... The story, he definitely knows how to play on people's emotions.
Okay.
Less than a year later, Sellers then sneaks into his parents' home. And this is so creepy. This was supposedly in a journal story. Again, he released to the public. He had just performed an occult ritual. He was only wearing black underwear at the time. His parents were fast asleep when he snuck into their bedroom and shot both of them in the head.
What?
Yes. He first shot his father.
The fuck?
Yeah. This Paul Belafato, who is 43 years old. And his mother...
That's young too.
Yeah, very young people. And his mother was only 32. Her name was Vonda Belafato. His mother did not die from the first shot.
Oh, God.
She sat up, and then he proceeded to shoot her again, and that is when she passed away.
Stop. Oh, my God. And your own... Okay, murder's one thing. But then your own parents,
Yeah. There's no comment being made.
Right.
So evil. He was mad, and his reasoning, again, is terrible. No logic. He said he was mad at his mom because she told him to stop dating his current girlfriend. His mother didn't approve of his girlfriend because she was a high school dropout. And later, he stated that he had nothing but cold hatred in him for his parents. Well, obviously.
What? Did he say why? Other than just because I'm a Satanist? A
little bit, and we'll get into it quite a bit. But
okay.
To answer your question, it's a lot of, he thinks they didn't treat him right. He was verbally and physically abused. But there's also contradicting stories if that's true.
Okay.
After he killed his parents, he drove out to his best friend's house, who I was talking about earlier, Robert Howard, the same guy who was an accomplice in the shooting of Robert Bauer, the store convenience guy.
Okay.
And he tells his best friend, can you imagine? He just wakes him up and he's like, I just killed my parents.
Wow.
And Robert, obviously, there's something wrong with him, too, because he automatically just helps Sean hide the gun.
Wow. And where are they getting these guns? That's my other question.
Well, anyone who wants to get a gun in the United States can get a gun.
Yeah. I don't know that because obviously I'm not for that. But I guess, yeah. I don't know anything about that world, so yeah. Anywho.
I mean, yeah, I think anyone who wants to get a gun.
You want fucking Amazon delivered to your fucking doorstep, probably.
Yeah. I think he was also strategic about this because he used Robert as his alibi, too. Like, he said that he spent the night at Robert's house.
Wow.
Because he knew, obviously, Robert's going to vouch for him.
Yep.
So Sellers tried to cover up the crime scene, and he tried to make it look like someone had broken into his parents' house and killed them.
Okay.
So the next morning, he wakes up and proceeds to drive over to his parents' house and do the whole acting thing, like, oh, I just discovered their dead bodies, and report it to the police. He soon, though, I'm sure he probably wasn't that clever. There must have been a lot of evidence pointing towards Sean, so he soon became the main suspect for killing his parents.
Sure.
And at trial, Sellers' defense was that he was practicing Satanism and that demonic possession had made him murder his victims.
Okay, so this is similar to the case I covered in The Devil Made Me Do It.
Yeah, very similar. I think the difference with this one is really the question I kind of said at the beginning. Do you believe in capital murder?
Okay.
So his lawyers also argue that one of their arguments, which I think is a terrible argument, but also I have to try to remember the time when this took place. It was the late 80s. One of their main arguments was that he was addicted to the game Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay. Yep.
Which have you heard of?
I sure have.
Yeah. But I was going to do some digging. What is this game? Because I always thought it was like a harmless game. I remember in college, like the little downtown strip, there was like, I believe, a little storefront where people go and play Dungeons and Dragons. So, but when I did a quick Google search, I thought this was so interesting. So we all know, like, when you search a subject, there's like common questions that pop up on a Google search, right?
Those are called related questions in my class that I'm teaching on SEO right now.
Yes.
I was grading papers all afternoon, can you tell?
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of my answers.
Yes.
It is not people also ask, although it is under the people also ask button.
Are you trying to be academic again?
No, it's just weird. Everything you're touching on, it's like, I'm like, oh shit, I was doing that today.
But anyway, the the questions that came up were, are Catholics allowed to play Dungeons and Dragons? Is Dungeons...
People actually ask that shit?
Well, there's more.
I'm a Catholic, I do that. I would. I'm not interested in playing, but I would.
Mm-hmm. Is Dungeons and Dragons a bad game? Why was Dungeons and Dragons banned? Is D&D a sin? Should Christians play Dungeons and Dragons? And I thought this was really interesting because I did not know that people saw Dungeons and Dragons in such a dark lens at certain points. And in 2004, a prison in Wisconsin actually banned prisoners playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, come on. It's like the one thing they get.
Yeah. But because they believed it promoted gang activity after they had received a letter from an anonymous prisoner stating that a few prisoners who were playing the game had started a gang.
Oh, well, in that case.
It could have happened.
Never mind.
But really, my key takeaway from it is just a harmless game.
Wait, gang or game?
Gang.
Okay. So, yes, in that case, okay, maybe they were right to take it away.
But I really think it's just a harmless game. Like we said, it's role play. And one person pointed out, and I thought this was a great point, that by role playing and playing this game, some kids are able to develop like different emotional skills such as tolerance and empathy.
Absolutely.
By role playing. So to me, and I kind of said this in the last episode, really reminds me of when we were pinpointing, not we, but when I say we as in a society, was trying to figure out like the Columbine shooting. It was this whole conversation about they were playing these dark video games where they're shooting people.
Yeah.
And like really trying to blame that like games can sway people's behavior, which I think everything, who you like surround yourself with, what you partake in, everything has an impact on you. But I don't really think video games games such as D&D have that much of an impact on people. Well,
there was that whole era. That's why the parental advisory exists, because it was like an attack on art, frankly, and musicians even too, because they wanted to ban like how they wanted to control, frankly, actually how children were raised in a Christian lens. And it's like, no, this is art, this is expression, and like you said, helping kids develop empathy and communication skills or problem solving skills.
The way you said that, though, I think you probably didn't mean... I don't think parental guidance is a bad thing. I think there's certain things that 5-year-olds shouldn't be exposed to.
Oh, well, sure. Yeah, of course. Like
the way
you're not going to buy a Eminem album for a 5-year-old. Of course not. But
I think that's a good thing. And maybe the way you said it came across that way, but I feel like they should have that. Because every child has different emotional intelligence of what they should be exposed to. The jury did not buy, obviously, that Sellers, A, was addicted to Dungeons and Dragons, and that was a role that played in him committing the murder. And B, didn't believe that he was possessed by the devil either. So they're like, no. A, bullshit. B, bullshit. He was given a life sentence with no possibility of parole, and he was charged with first-degree murder.
Okay.
And it came out that the jury worried that Sellers would be able to weasel his way into parole and be out of jail in 7 to 14 years. And that is why they ultimately decided on the death penalty. Other jurors have came forward and denied this conversation ever took place.
Interesting.
Yes. And this made Sellers the first minor to be sentenced to death in 40 years. He was the 18th minor to ever have this severe of a conviction. So you may be questioning at this point, okay, so what happened to his friend, Robert Howard?
Sure was.
Yeah, that helped him kill Robert Bauer. So Robert Howard was initially charged with first-degree murder, but then the state dismissed the charge if he'd be willing to cooperate with the state, obviously testify against his friend.
Okay.
So in return, he was only sentenced for 5 years.
Wow.
So Sellers loved being talked about. Like, he craved the attention, right?
Organized killer.
Yeah, and he even behind bars, he soon became a main conversation that was ongoing with the media. Yep. Vicki Dawkins and Nina Higgins wrote a book about this whole case called Devil Child. And they were one of the first people who could interview him once he was found guilty. And they recall that he had been dying to talk the whole time. But during the trial, obviously, his attorneys had trained him to be quiet, right? Keep your mouth shut. They said that he loved the attention. To him, it was hard for him. He was the center of attention, but he just couldn't come out and talk about it. So during the interviews, when it was the total of the three of them,
okay,
he really thought, they also got the feeling that he kind of thought he was above everything. He thought he was going to get away with it.
Really?
Yeah, and he had a really hard time coming to terms that he was found guilty. Because it wasn't something in his realm of possibility that he was ever going to be found guilty.
Well, he thinks he's above God as a Satanist priest or whatever.
Yeah. So, like I said, he was granted no parole originally, but that changed when it started to become a talking point. And people really started to question through the media and people having conversations if it was a cruel and unusual punishment to execute a minor. So in January 1987, the date of his execution, it was pushed back. So let's all remember that date because it's going to be a long time from now. January 1987. Okay. So during this time, while Sellers was in prison waiting to hear the outcome, which would either be a death sentence or they were trying to... His opponents who were fighting against the death sentence, they were saying he should still have a lifelong imprisonment, but they didn't feel like he should be executed.
Okay.
So this guy is a manipulator. So he became what I would say, quote unquote, Christian, because I'm not buying it. And again, his narcissistic self thought that he could be a leader of another religion. Who is this person? And he organized a religious ministry from prison.
Oh, boy.
And people accused him of doing all this. It was an act. And he's trying to gain sympathy from the public. So I found this interesting. He was allowed, I guess, probably most inmates have, I know they have access to the internet, but he was allowed to have a journal where he publicly was able to write his thoughts, which I thought, I probably should look into that. Is that something they're allowed to do still today?
Publish it?
Publish it. People are able to read his journal.
I've never heard of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, that seems crazy to me. Because I've heard about inmates who are released and they have no works. They don't have relative work skills because they've never even looked at a computer that had internet.
Oh, wow.
Could you even imagine?
That's so sad. No, I can't imagine.
But like you come out like 30 years later and you're like looking at a smartphone and be like an alien thing to you.
So bizarre. No, I've never heard of that. I certainly heard of obviously like killers trying to get fame off of their case through media, books, movies, etc. But I never knew like journals. That's an interesting question. No, I haven't.
Yeah, and his friends. Now I'm saying this a little bit out loud. I did later in the story kind of talk about his friends put something together for him. So I wonder if his friends are publishing the journal.
Oh, it could be.
Yeah, because I never really got to the root of that. Because I was just like, that doesn't make sense to me that they would give him a platform to write about. But regardless of how it came out, the journal is public for people to read. And he wrote the following. Quote, "It's not some title I put upon myself or display as a label on my shirt. It's the heart of who I am and all I want to be. Christian, Christ-like," he wrote in his internet journal. "I dream of heaven."
Okay.
Yeah.
Buddy.
Yeah, exactly. And Sellers' friends started a website on his behalf and campaigned for a pardon because of his religious conversion. And they also fought because he was a minor and because he was under the influence of Satanism at the time when he committed the murders, that they thought he deserved another trial. And this story had so much national attention. He was one of the most famous people to ever be on death row. He appeared actually on My Favorite Lady show, Oprah. And also appeared in documentaries about Satanism and serial killers on 48 Hours, NBC, MSNBC, and AE Network.
Well, this motherfucker's just doing the press run for himself. That's what the fuck he's doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Come on.
He even discussed his crimes to People's Magazine. And during this interview, he discussed that he had apologized to the victims' families several times, but they were never receptive.
Did they prove that he actually did do that?
I think he did.
Okay.
Probably not in his online journal.
Okay.
But what did he expect? Like, why would they be receptive?
Why?
In the 48 Hours interview, he talked about being remorseful and he had guilt. But he also, why I don't buy it is because he said he never could understand why he did it. So if you couldn't come to the root reason of why you did it, I can't imagine you're very remorseful or reflective.
Right.
Okay, so every story definitely needs a little romance.
Oh.
So
little girlfriend or boyfriend in jail.
Imagine this romantic marriage. So he was married on Valentine's Day in 1995.
In prison, I'm assuming.
Yeah, in prison.
Okay.
God, that'd be a sad setup.
Oh my God.
I just can't fathom how a woman would drive to prison, say we're married, and then drive home. What are you getting out of that?
You know what? We need to cover this because that's a whole like psychological situation that happens. And I'm like, I don't understand it. And I'm curious.
But I don't even understand what you're gaining out of being married to that person because that's no partnership. You're not talking to them every day. What are you gaining out of it?
Girl.
Because most times, like, people are in a relationship because they're not... Because you love a person, obviously, but there are selfish means to why you're with a person. Because you want partnership.
Yes, of course.
A relationship. You want someone who's there for you. You want to be there for them. You have... I don't have to explain why people are in relationships, but I can't understand... I can't explain why people will put themselves in relationships, but it's not even really a relationship.
Yeah, that's so bizarre.
Yeah. Anyway, the government was like, nuh-uh, you aren't married, and they declared the marriage not valid 2 years later. And they would not recognize the marriage. The state said no.
Okay, that's interesting.
They're like, cute attempt, but no. People other than his friends were protesting the fact that he was sentenced to death. So one of them was a minister named Bill Mason, and he would go pray with Sellers in jail very often. It was like a common thing he did. And he really believed that he felt remorse for what he did. And he came up with the slogan, "Stop killing kids." And this became a popular echo at the time that a lot of his opponents were using.
It's a good one, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, he had people like hoodwinked. And obviously there are several people who did not buy Sellers' bullshit, like me. Several prison guards stated that the whole, quote, "I'm a Christian, feel sorry for me" act. Or wait, let me say that again. Okay. Several prison guards stated that the whole "I'm a Christian, feel sorry for me" was all an act. Which, yeah, I could see that. The writing was on the wall. In one of the interviews, and this is to me like, oh my God, this is when you know he's not on planet Earth. Sean Sellers, he thought he needed to share his thoughts with the world through an online journal, and he compared himself to Anne Frank. Like, how dare you?
Oh, no.
Yes, and this is what Sean Sellers...
What a piece of shit.
Yeah. I'm like, she was put in an awful situation. You chose your situation.
Wow.
Like, your situation's from the consequence of your actions.
Holy
Well, you want to hear
shit.
what he had to say about it?
Yes.
I started to wonder what she would have given the world had she lived. What stories she would have told us, he explained. I wondered if my life would ever mean anything, and I told some friends that I would like to put together something to keep my words alive, that would show me for who I am and not for what I did. And I'm
okay,
to me, I'm a firm believer actions mean so much more than words.
Yes.
Like, we all know that.
Yep.
He must have missed third grade, like, calendar time when you talk about that stuff. That's what I'm saying.
I love it. I love it.
In his online journals, he writes about his mother, like, and we kind of talked, you asked me earlier, like, his mother, he said his version of his story is that his mother would verbally and physically abuse him. And Sellers' family members fought this, or his mother, I should say his mother's family members, because I'm sure they denounced his ass.
Sure.
They fought this, and they said, yes, she might have been gruff at times, she was serious, but there really were no signs of abuse. And I think her name was Vonda. Vonda's family was outraged, and they couldn't believe that he was given an online platform to write about the murders, and they were like, why is he allowed to have a platform to come out with lies and, like, fictionalize what happened and write his truth of why he murdered his parents?
Right, exactly. Why does he get the platform?
And, like, they hated to see the fact that he was, like, winning the hearts of his supporters through this online platform. Like, how dare you? You took our loved ones from us, and now you are manipulating people to be on your side.
Mm-hmm.
And he had such a huge following because of all these TV appearances he was partaking in. And at one point, he received over 600 letters a week while he was in prison.
Ugh.
600. How do you get 600 people to like you that much?
I don't know. Maybe we could use his help for our podcast.
I was just about to say that. We don't have that happening for us. I don't want to take a note from Sellers,
no,
though.
Absolutely not.
While he was in prison, he wrote a book of love stories and poems called Julador, and this book was self-published and sold through his website.
Hold up. He has a website now? I mean, I knew he had his online journal, but for some reason I didn't put up, like, a website
Well,
together.
his friends made one on his behalf.
My God.
Where people were going to support the fact that they didn't think he should be executed.
Got it.
Of course, like you said, I think you mentioned, this is illegal. And the Oklahoma law kind of came down and was like, you can't make profits off a crime that you've committed.
Right.
Because that's pretty much what he was doing.
I didn't know if that was a federal thing or state by state, but perhaps it's a state.
I hope it's a federal and global thing. You shouldn't be able to make any money off any crime you commit.
Right. I totally agree.
And Oklahoma's state court started to investigate if he or his friends were making a profit off this book. But they never really were able to pinpoint anything and find any evidence, unfortunately. However, shortly before his death, a Christian, which kills me, Christian book publisher did publish his...
there's a shit ton of them. X used to work for one of them.
I know, but a Christian book publisher thought they should take his book and publish it. That's what I'm saying is mind-blowing. Not the fact there is a Christian book.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yep. Yeah. What?
Yes. A Christian book publisher did publish his autobiography, and they called it The Web of Darkness in 1999. So to me, that Christian book publisher is not so Christian or moral. I think they were just doing a money grab.
Oh, 100. I mean, especially if they're a big church.
How could you call yourself a Christian book publisher by giving him a platform when he's a murderer? That's like the opposite of what it means to be a Christian.
Can't even with those people.
In 1999, keep in mind, he was convicted in 1986. So this is 14 years later.
Yeah, that's quite a long time.
Yes. He had another appeal. So this is kind of like what happens in our judicial system. Appeal after appeal and nothing ever happens. Where they came forward and stated that he had multiple personality disorder.
Oh.
The jury then came to the conclusion that he may have suffered from a multiple personality disorder, but it was too late to have this information for an appeal. They're like, okay, it's 14 years later. Now you're coming out with this information.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where was this information at that time? The Human Rights Watch group came forward and stated they were outraged by this conclusion and that there was uncontested clinical evidence that he had multiple personality disorder and that no civilized society should execute someone for crimes they committed as a child. And then the people on the opposite side, psychiatrists, came forward stating that this was just like a desperate attempt. And Sellers would have been diagnosed with a multiple personality disorder 7 years ago, or 14 years ago, I mean, if he truly had one. Like, they would have known at the time when he was in trial.
Okay.
They're like, you can't just come up with excuses now.
Okay.
It's a little late. And prison guards, so there's like so many players in this conversation, right? It's like he said, she said, right? So prison guards then came forward too, and they said they saw Sellers rehearsing interviews with his attorney to appear that he had multiple personalities. So it's all like a rehearsed act.
Holy shit.
Yes. He also, so this is turned down, and then he made the insanity claim. That was turned down too.
Based on the demon or whatever.
Well, no, he already tried the demon one. This is another one.
Not demon, but insanity. Got it.
He said he was clinically insane, or his attorneys did. And then he filed 2 more appeals. I didn't really get the details on those, but I'm sure come up with any other bullshit idea you can think of and slap it on there, and that's probably what he did. And they were all denied too. And 2 days later, he was executed.
Oh, shit. My guy was executed too. My guy was executed too.
Oh, okay. So for his last meal, which I think is important to mention because I love food, he had egg rolls, sweet and sour shrimp, and battered fried shrimp. And you know where this question's going.
What would I have?
Yeah.
A toss-up between like a fat-ass steak and mashed potatoes or like something cheesy. Mac and cheese.
It'd be so hard to decide.
Oh my god, that's why I'm having a tough time. But
French fries would definitely be included. I'd have a glass of red wine, for sure.
Oh, yeah, if we're allowed to have booze, then yeah, of course, a nice glass of whiskey, yeah.
I don't think you're allowed to have that, but I mean, we're in our own imaginary world here. I'd want a little taste of every cuisine, but I know the prison guards aren't going to go out to every cuisine. And my question is, okay, you get your last meal, like, do you get to choose which restaurant makes it, or just? I have so many questions about this.
I do too. I'd be like,
do you
get to choose? Is there a price limit?
Yeah, I was like, what's your budget? They'd be like, can you shut up? You're like a
you about to die.
Prisoner. But I think I would choose French fries for sure. I'd like to dip in homemade ranch dressing.
Oh, baby. I'm hungry again, even though we just ate dinner.
A really good cheeseburger could be on my list.
Okay. I follow that.
Guacamole. I don't know. That's a hard one.
Yeah, I'm going with the steak, I think. A nice, big-ass, really expensive, like, Wagyu steak. Straight from Japan. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be a hard one. And at the age of 29, at 12:17 a.m. on February 4th, 1999, Sean Sellers was injected with both arms with poison that stopped his breathing. This is where I find this really creepy. He said, "Here I come, Father," Sellers said loudly. "I'm coming home." He then turned to Warden Gary Gibson and said, "Let's do it, Gary. Let's get it on." Sellers then began singing, "Set my spirit free that I might praise thee. Set my spirit free that I might worship thee." Those were his last words. Earlier, Sellers began his final statement by addressing relatives of his stepfather. He said, quote, "All the people that are hating me right now are here waiting to see me die. When you wake up in the morning, you're not going to feel any different. You're going to hate me just as much tomorrow as tonight. When you wake up and nothing has changed inside you, reach out to God and he will be there for you. Reach out to God and he will heal you. Let him touch your hearts. Don't hate all your lives."
You don't get to after...
Oh, I'm not finished yet.
Oh, he's still going?
Yeah.
Oh, no, honey. All right.
Yeah, he then told his 7 witnesses, and this is the relatives of the stepfather who were there, "I love you all." The 7 witnesses recalled that he looked happy during all this. I almost feel like he was gloating, which is sickening.
Ew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's rubbing it in is what he's doing.
I feel like it. Almost like because they were there for the satisfaction to see him pass away and like come to peace with it. And I almost feel like he's like, I'm gonna have the last word, which you really didn't, because you're the one under the ground right now. But I feel like that's what he was trying to establish.
Yeah, taunting. Like, aha.
Yeah. During this, there was a group of 100 people protesting. Some were his fans, and others admired him for turning in. Like, some of them admired him for different motives. Some people loved him because he turned into a Christian. And some people, I think, sickly admired him because he was a murderer. And they were like, why are you killing him at such a young age?
Well, yeah, there's always that where, like, women are obsessed with murderers, and it's so bizarre. I want to cover that, too.
Yeah.
Add that to the list.
Yes. Got a long list here. Since Sellers had become such an interest in the media, people were reporting on the story all over the world. TV reporters from Germany, England, France are a few countries to name at the Oklahoma State prison. Even Mick Jagger, which I couldn't believe, he wasn't there, but he had came forward as an advocate for Sellers, saying that he shouldn't be sentenced to death.
Oh, boy.
He then became the 512th person to be sentenced to death since the death penalty was reinstated in 1977. And at this time, he was the 12th juvenile to face the death penalty. Sellers remains the only person in the U.S. executed for a crime that was committed under the age of 17.
Oh, wow.
The Supreme Court in 2005 ruled in the case Roper versus Simmons that it was unconstitutional to execute an individual for a crime that was committed under the age of 18.
Interesting.
So that is the devil child, Sean Sellers, the last young juvenile to be executed in the U.S. But I thought it was a really interesting story just for the conversation about, like, I know some people have very strong opinions, kind of like we talked about at the beginning, but hearing the story, do you feel like him being executed was right, or do you feel like maybe he did have multiple personality disorder? What do you feel about it?
God, it's so hard to say because I think he clearly knew what he was doing by manipulating the media and the public so well, from that lens. And so if you know what you're doing, as I said in my history, that to me is more scary and more problematic because you're a master manipulator and you have that power and control over people. But I think first of all, I'm very conflicted on the death penalty at large. Second of all, I'm very conflicted about it for a juvenile. So, oh my God, this is a really tough one for me. Like, it's a moral question.
I do too, but then in a sense, this sounds so dark what I'm about to say, but does our tax dollars have to go supporting some evil human being like that being alive?
Oh, I see, like in prison?
Yeah, like we pay more for an inmate a year than a student.
Oh, I know.
I think, like, it's probably case-by-case basis, but through this research, like, through the little glimpse I got into the story, I felt like he's a sick individual. He was manipulating people to make feel sorry for him. He had this whole act of, oh, I've converted now. I'm a Christian. I'm a good person. Look at me. Mm-hmm. And, like, almost like the last moments of his life, he was, like, gloating and kind of rubbing it in their face, like, I've caused you a life. He kind of even said, in a sense, like, I've tortured you. Mm-hmm. You have hate in your heart, and they're probably going to have hate in their heart the rest of their lives, kind of like he said. And he knew that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, so part of me is a little bit like, I don't know if I really mourn the fact that he's gone. So
gotcha.
I'm a little bit conflicted because I don't want to wish death on people, but I could also see in this case, he seems really evil. And I think, to me, it's hard, like we talked about, because, I mean, when I think about people who've gone and, like, done mass shootings, I don't really feel like those people deserve to live, personally.
That's where I get into my, like, okay, well, I believe in it. Even, I don't believe that, well, no surprise, since I believe people are inherently shitty, that I don't believe in reform. I think that people... so like that whole thing, I know in Canada it's a huge thing, is like prisoner reform versus imprisonment, and I don't think that's possible. I really don't. Like, if you're committing such heinous acts of especially murder or rape or any other violent heinous crime, I don't think you're gonna change.
Yeah, and then I I read Orange is the New Black, and it was really interesting perspective because she was sent to jail for obviously drug-related causes. Mm-hmm. But the big takeaway I took from that book, and I was like, what a great way to kind of outline it. She was like, I didn't learn anything by being in prison about being a better human. The only thing I learned about being in prison is how to survive in prison.
Oh, wow.
That's she's like, the only thing the system taught me was how to function in jail. It didn't teach me anything about functioning on the outside. And that's why so many people end up back in there, because that's all they know.
Mm-hmm. It's comforting to them because the outside
I don't think world, it's comforting.
Well, compared to the outside world, where again, like, they see a cell phone, don't know what the fuck it is, or like, you know, some of them didn't have a home, and this is the only way they can get food or shelter.
And I really don't think prison should be allowed for private companies to make profit off of.
Don't even get me started on the prison industrial complex, bro. I mean,
bro,
especially
who are you?
No, it's awful, especially in our state. It's disgusting. So I'm very conflicted, right? Because you'd think with that belief that I don't believe in the profit prison system, but I also, in case by case basis, just like you said, like, well, death penalty might be warranted for some individuals. So I don't know, man. I struggle with this one.
I believe the statistic was either 90% or 98%. So an astounding amount of people on death row can't read. So it shows you.
Oh, wow. Okay, then that changes my perspective.
A huge correlation with education.
Yep.
And probably also, in a sense, if you're educated, usually
money.
Well, not even money. It comes to privilege. So that's something also to consider, and I think that is why it's so challenging, because you could have someone on death row who is very, aware of what they did, and then you have these other people who are mentally insane and they didn't know what they did. So I think it's hard to paint anything with a brushstroke and say a yes or a no.
Totally agree, and I hate that we can't, it sounds like almost cop-outy, because, like, people today are obviously like have to draw a line in the sand and where do you stand and all this bullshit, but I don't know on this one. This is one that I cannot say I have a firm stance on. Oh.
Yeah, and like the fact that he had an online platform, I was like, how is that allowed? That's something I would like to know, like, I'm sure prisoners have access to online, because I remember when I worked at a for-profit college at one point, which I hated, but I would talk to students who were inmates.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think you told me that a few times.
Yeah, and like I remember one time one guy was like, I wasn't allowed to use the internet for a week, so I didn't get my assignment done. Or he wouldn't have enough allotted time on the computer to get his assignments done.
Got it.
Because I'm sure every prisoner only gets a few hours a day, or they probably have limits, because I'm sure the resources, even though just like education, but they probably don't have any resources or the computers to utilize for everyone. But I know they do a lot of like online education for prisoners as well.
Okay.
So they do have access to internet, so they must be able to post things.
Crazy.
Interesting. I don't know, but I don't really think they're on Facebook or Instagram. From my
there's ways they can, they can hack it somehow, I'm sure.
There's not a dating app. Swipe left on Prisoner Daddy.
Maybe I should get on it.
Are you gonna lock me up with your handcuffs?
Okay. Listen.
Prisoner Daddy. I don't think that's around, is it?
There you go. TM that shit.
Okay, well, that is my long tangent of Sean Sellers, but I thought it was an interesting one, and I'm interested to hear what you got.
Really good job. Mine's really dark, so.
I assumed.
Yeah, like real.
I don't think you have to tell us that when it has to do with murder. It's kind of a given. Do you think anyone puts a murder podcast on because they're like, I'm here for a laugh?
No, certainly not. But it disturbed me today. That's why I'm kind of in a funky mood, because it was like really got into my psyche, like bad.
Okay, well, I guess I'll be ready to be depressed on my drive home.
Yeah. Yay.
Okay, well, we'll hand it off.
Awesome. Y'all ready for some darkness? more.
I mean, I don't think mine was a light-hearted story.
No, it wasn't. This is just going to take us continually through that trajectory. This is the story of Hamilton Howard Fish. Albert, as he became known later, is one of the more prolific serial killers, claiming that not the devil, but that God made him do it.
So God in his mind is evil.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
And he became really obsessed with this defense, if you will.
I'm assuming you've listened to several podcasts about this guy.
Yeah, and videos, actually. Yeah, and let me get into it. He's a real piece of shit. Go figure. He was born in 1870 in Washington, D.C. And not only does his rap sheet include murder, but it also lists him as a rapist, child molester, and, yes, cannibal.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
I was like, the first three are pretty common with someone who commits murder.
Yep. So he's got that more than just the triad we talked about here, adding cannibalism to it. And there's some really disturbing letters that I'll link to. We don't have time to read them, but he basically wrote taunting letters to victims' families about essentially eating their children.
Wow, that is another level of evil. I don't think I've heard this one.
Yeah, it's disgusting. Other names he got were the Gray Man, the Werewolf of Wisteria, which is part of Queens, the Brooklyn Vampire, and the Moon Maniac, and the Boogeyman. Yay!
Was he the original Boogeyman?
That's a great question. I don't think so, but there's a story that I'm going to tell where one child calls him that.
I kind of want to know where the original Boogeyman, even where that came from.
Me too. It's really scary. Like, do you remember Night Before Christmas? Or Nightmare Before Christmas?
I think I've only watched half of it.
Girl. You're killing me on my references.
You never know any of my references.
But I guess you're right. We need to sync up on those.
And I was going to call you out earlier because I was listening to her episode. I was like, that girl did not watch Goop.
I haven't yet.
Yeah, because in the episode you're like 30 times. I think you're like, I'm going to watch it. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to watch it. I was like, are you actually?
Not interested, frankly.
You should, though. Well, you pretended to be very much into it last episode.
I don't know. I'm interested more in her sex life one with the couples.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get back to this topic.
Anyway, back to horribleness. He's one of the most, obviously, based on those titles and his actions, one of the most deviant serial killers. He had crimes that were riddled with rage. And as I said, taunting letters to victims' families, which were really, really disgusting.
Wow.
So early life started off strange for that era, late 1800s. His father was Randall Fish, and he was 75 years old when Albert was born.
Wow. I wonder if that was more common during the time,
Maybe, but I feel like that's like really fucking old.
But how old was the mom?
43 years younger, so that would make her, what,
like 30-something?
30-something.
But that seems really old for that age to be, at that time, to be giving birth.
I thought so, too.
Because even in the late 80s, they put my mom, she was like 31. They put her on the geriatric unit.
Oh, that's still to this day. 34, I think, is
They need to change that vocabulary.
It's the way it is. My sister talks about it all the time. But yeah.
But they need to change that. Like they could find a better word to use.
They might, but medically it's where it's at. These days still. So anyway, dad was 75, mom was in her 30s. Her name was Ellen. And it's reported that she, on her side of the family, had some schizophrenia and other mental disorders later.
The mom?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's probably passed down.
I think in this case it probably was, as we'll get to some of his psychotic outbursts and behaviors. So Randall, Albert's dad, died when Albert was just 5 years old. And because of that, the mom, Ellen, was kind of destitute for a while and was forced to send her children to an orphanage. At this orphanage, Albert Fish sung in the choir, which sounds lovely. But unfortunately, No, his experience there was anything but lovely. In fact, he was beaten mercilessly, not only by older boys there in the orphanage, but even by staff. And at some point during these regular beatings, he like would get aroused while being beaten. And so obviously you can see his erection. And so the other boys would see that and torment him further.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was stuck in this orphanage for about 4 years. But later his mom eventually did get a job and she was able to get her children back. And she moved them from Washington, D.C. area to New York City.
This is early 1800s?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or sorry, late.
Late. Okay, I thought we were talking about early.
Excuse me. Yeah, if I said early, I apologize. Late 1800s, 1890s. Okay. And because he was born 1870, so mid to late 1800s. And so when he moved to the city with his mom and siblings, he met a neighborhood boy who introduced him to some really gross, like depraved practices and was interested in actually drinking urine and eating feces. And then
The young boy was, or?
The young boy was.
His friend?
Yeah. Like, introduced him to, like, doing these kind of weird shit. And so he continued to do that.
That's another weird kid I would not want to sit by at lunch.
Like, ugh. As he grew older, he'd hang out he was still young. He was, like, probably, like, 9, 10 around this. But he'd, like, sneak out and go to, they call them bathing rooms, but essentially, like, men's spas. And he'd go there just so he could spy on young boys getting undressed. Other young boys getting undressed.
Okay. So he was probably leaning towards being gay, right?
Yes, and we'll get into it. He had a lot of male lovers, actually. He, at the age of 11, fell from a cherry tree, and that caused him a concussion, headaches, dizzy spells, and a stutter, a very noticeable stutter. And that, as we know, could be a cause of further mental illness and or getting fucked up to be able to not process your crimes in a...
Well, he sounds like a tortured... From what I've already heard, he sounds like he was a tortured soul.
Yeah. Oh, and he goes on to inflict a lot of torture, sadly. In his teens, in the 1890s, he claimed that he worked not only as a painter, like house painting or, interior painting, but also a male prostitute. Although the male prostitute claim was never corroborated. And according to his own testimony, at age 29, he began to molest young children, preferring those under the age of 6.
Wow,
he would,
that's disgusting.
Mm-hmm, he would often write letters back to women who placed personal ads in papers and taunt them and write really obscene shit to them. And then during this time, he would also be roaming the streets basically for lost and abused and neglected children. It's reported that he has had countless victims in this era in his early youth and young manhood, where he would specifically prey on poor or black boys or boys with a mental disorders. Yep. Because he in his mind, Albert knew that they wouldn't be picked up by the police.
So I'm hearing a repeating trend. Did he target boys more than girls?
Yeah.
Because that's more common. I feel like men serial killers usually target women.
Yeah, there is some cases that I'll get to that some female victims later, but I do think his sexual preference was males based on a lot of the victimology, if that's the proper term. So moving on to the later 1890s, his mother arranged a marriage for him to Anna Mary Hoffman. Together they had 6 children, but while they were married, Albert was well known to have copious affairs with many, many men, and one such lover brought him to an anatomical wax museum. And in this museum, there was an exhibit about tribal genital mutilation. And there was a mold of a wax penis where Albert then became even more obsessed with genital mutilation.
Sickening.
Yeah. He then, for the rest of his life, oh, this is so sick, brace yourself. After seeing this exhibit, he decided to insert needles into his scrotum and penis to achieve orgasm.
What?
Yeah. So into his religious craze. The men in prison, because he was in prison before his murder for theft, they would also be kind of like scared of him. And they said his behavior got very bizarre, and reportedly Albert would claim to hear messages from the Apostle John, including a vision that he believed it was a sign from God that he should be castrating little boys.
Okay, so earlier when we were having that conversation about death penalty, I think on this one, I kind of know where I'm leaning.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not pretty. But ironically, or not so ironically, based on his heinous crimes, he ended up in the electric chair as well. Oh, well, sorry. Sean had the needles, or the, what do you call it, injections.
Yeah.
Rather, this Albert was the electric chair.
I wonder when they stopped using that.
That's a great question. Yeah, I don't know. Now back on the capital punishment thing, I'm thinking how inhumane those can be too. But anywho, we got to do a whole episode on that because, man, there's a lot. So later in life, in his marriage, his wife actually left him for another man. And so he was left to raise 6 children, all on his own.
What was that woman thinking? She should have saved those babies.
I know. How could you leave your children? But reportedly, the children said they were never abused by his dad.
I was going to say, I thought they probably were already abused by his dad.
Yeah, apparently there's no claims by them or any other reports that they were. But they did claim and report that they witnessed their father doing really weird behaviors, like they'd find him rolled up in rugs, or they'd be asked by their father to do weird things to him. Like, well, he'd be on his hands and knees, like tabletop position. They would sit on his back, and he'd ask them to hold their hands up with a number. And he had to guess whatever number they had. And if he got it wrong, he asked his own children to spank his bare ass with a paddle with nails in it.
This story is something else.
Isn't it?
I also kind of wonder, though, if at that time period, if those children felt comfortable coming forward and stating if they were sexually abused, because I wonder how society would have handled it. How they would have been perceived in society at that time.
It's a great question. No reports about it, but you're absolutely right. That's a wonderful, wonderful question. They probably weren't. I mean, based on being subjected to spanking your dad's bare ass with a fucking paddle, that's a form of abuse to me. But
with nails?
Yeah.
That's really messed up.
Awful, right? And Albert Fish became obsessed with, again, God telling him to abduct young boys and other like just all over the city. Before he was married, even he was doing that, as I said, and those victims are unknown, unfortunately, countless. But as we get into the 1900s, he meets a young 19-year-old man named Thomas Kedden, and it's reported that Kedden was mentally disabled, no surprise, and Fish brought this young man to a cabin in the woods. And over a period of 2 weeks, they would have like crazy sadomasochistic sex. But by the end, it really became incredibly torture, with Fish obviously being the dominant and administering all the pain, including, oh my God, so disturbing, switches from trees that he'd cut off himself. So like pricker bushes. And he'd use those to flay Kedden's skin from his butt.
Oh God, no, this is really gross.
Yeah, I told you. This is just the beginning, my friend.
Oh God, I don't know if I can handle the rest of this.
Yeah. He forced Kedden to eat his own feces and an entire pack of needles, or shoved an entire pack of needles in his penis and his butt.
Oh, no. How do people do this all day, every day as a podcast?
Yep.
I could not. I'm glad this is one episode.
Yep.
I can't handle it. This is dark.
And then finally, to end it, he took a butcher knife when Kedden was aroused and chopped off half of his penis. He then left Kedden for dead with he threw $10 on him and left him for dead.
I feel like physically ill.
Yep. And it's not known if Kedden ever survived or if he was lost in the woods or ever found. But
how would you survive that?
I no idea.
Oh, that is just... sorry, this is disturbing in a whole nother level.
I told ya. I was trying to warn ya.
I wasn't prepared for this.
Kedden, again, unknown what happened to him. So his original plan / goal was to murder Kedden, but the smell of the flesh was so potent that Fish thought he was going to get caught. So that's why he left him for dead. So he didn't even want to like deal with cleanup or being caught because the torture and the
Oh god.
body was smelling. So yeah.
Yeah, this is. I'm just like my jaws dropped. I'm like, this is disgusting.
So back to his children for a hot second. They would also report, aside from having to spank their father with the nail-studded board, they also reported hearing their dad, take on really crazy religious rants. And he, as I mentioned, thought he was receiving direct messages from the 12 apostles. He'd go outside screaming with his fist in the air, "I am Christ! I am Christ!" And
he thinks Christ acts like that?
Apparently. He was obsessed with the idea of atoning for sins through pain and torture. And not only did he impale Kedden with nails, he actually self-inflicted pain with putting nails under his own fingernails and regularly inserted them into his own penis. And
oh God, this is awful.
He couldn't pull them out, so he just left them in there.
Oh.
And
when
later,
they get infected,
you would think, there's a quote I have about how they don't know how the hell he didn't die.
Yeah, you would think that it would get infected.
Sepsis Later, when Fish was arrested, he was telling the police officers and law enforcement that he did this practice with needles in his body.
God bless those police officers.
They didn't believe him. So they're like, and they noticed this, by the way, because no shit, he couldn't sit normally because there's needles in his dick and his ass. So they were like, no, you didn't. You don't do that. Or that's weird. And so they gave him an x-ray to prove it. And they found 27 needles floating in Fish's abdomen and bladder.
Just in his abdomen and bladder?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah.
How could you... I'm sorry, but I could not be a police officer seeing that situation. I would have to walk away. I'd be like, here's my resignation.
Like, I'm out. I'm out.
Here's my resignation. I'm done.
Oh, God.
That's enough to scar me for the rest of my life. I'm done.
You're not going to go Mindhunter on his ass?
Hell no. I would never want to do anything like in that realm of things.
I couldn't either. One other bizarre thing that he did to self-inflict pain. This is probably worse to me. Look. Okay, brace yourself. Oh my God, it's so awful.
I don't know if I want to know.
So
Can
awful.
we just stop?
One more thing, and then I'll move on.
I'm just kidding.
He would take balls of wool, soak them in lighter fluid, stick them up his rectum, and light them on fire.
How?
So essentially, his whole ass canal was on fire.
I'm sorry, but I'm sad he didn't die from these things.
Well, it's a miracle he didn't, frankly.
But it's just sad that the miracle of all miracles had to happen for him because he deserved to die.
Yes, he did. This is
a long, painful death.
Many more victims that he did horrific things to, including cannibalism.
I forgot we haven't even got to that part yet.
No, we did not. And again, by 1919, he's already batshit screaming that God's making him do all these things and that he was forced to do it or told to do it by the 12 apostles.
Do we know what he looks like?
Yes, really like wise old man, but also a creepy old man. White beard, piercing eyes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just can't even imagine this could come in human form. It just seems so evil.
Yeah. So it keeps going as far as abducting and abusing and murdering young boys. But it wasn't only boys, to your point in question earlier. In July of 1924, he saw this beautiful young girl about the age of 8 years old. And by the way, he preferred his victims at 6 years old. Disgusting. This girl was on her mother's farm and he saw her, I guess, driving by or walking by, and he went up to her and he's like, "Hey, do you want to pick rhubarb with me?" As like a ploy to get her to go away with him, to your earlier point about locations and serial killers.
Yeah, I talked about that on Tuesday. Yeah,
on Tuesdays. So thank God the mom was like, saw this happening and she's like, hell no, and chased him off. It happened again, but the dad then chased him off. Later, back in his New York neighborhood, there were 2 boys around the hood that he lured over, and he invited them over to play. And the boys were play wrestling on his bed when they fell off, and they saw underneath the bed some items from Fish's nightmare, I would call it torture house, frankly. They saw tools that were in his murder kit, essentially, and they were his self-proclaimed instruments of hell. They included a meat cleaver, a hacksaw, a knife, and a garrote that he handmade from a belt. Thankfully, these boys, upon seeing this, escaped. So those boys escaped.
Like, how lucky were they that they accidentally fell?
Right, because they would have been in his oven, frankly. And I'm going to get into that very shortly. So, obviously, again, his MO is abducting Black and poor boys and mentally challenged boys. One day, he unknowingly, however, abducted Francis McDonald. Francis, cute little boy, by the way, was actually the son of a Staten Island police officer. So,
I'm assuming this is how he gets caught.
No.
Oh, okay.
You would think.
I was hoping. I was like, is this story coming to an end?
No, girl. One more page. 3 of 4, baby. We're almost there.
I was like, this is some
We're getting there.
Dark stuff.
Oh, yeah, it's awful. So he sees little Francis playing outside with a group of boys. And the boys all see this gray-haired man, and they're like, okay, what the hell? Somehow, Albert is able to lure little Francis away from the group. And, it's awful. Just bear with me. Again, Dad, being a police officer, immediately sent a search party out when the boy did not return home. And so the boys that he was playing with were obviously scrutinized and questioned and interviewed by Francis's dad and other police officers. And all they kept saying was, the gray-haired man. There was a gray-haired man hanging around. And sadly, the boy didn't turn up for months. But later, he was found hanging from a tree and near a pile of leaves and sticks by Boy Scouts who were playing in the area. Okay, this is really bad. Okay, so here we go. Just earmuffs, y'all, if you need it. Amy, I needed it. Okay. The body was found, obviously, by these innocent Boy Scouts. Fish strangled the boy so hard with his own suspenders that the belt or the suspenders looked like they were part of his flesh. Obviously, after the body was found, being that Dad was a police officer, there were officers on the scene within minutes, and the next day, immediately, 250 officers had been assigned to the case. The boy's father, Alfred McDonald, even transferred himself to Staten Island just so he could work on the case personally. More disturbing evidence from the coroner's exam found that the boy had been made to swallow razor blades shortly before his death.
Oh, God. Oh, no.
Yeah. And sadly, though, the coroner said, and sadly because this is how he eluded capture on this horrific murder, the coroner said there's no way that an old man could have done this. It had to be someone in their prime or a man in their prime. But still, the sightings of the gray man were about town everywhere, in every paper, and almost like definitely national fame. In another case, he'll get global infamy, but still to no avail. He escaped this one. And the mother even made a plea later on after the case became cold, please help us find the gray man. So that's one of his...
So they called him the gray man. Okay.
Yep, one of his many nicknames.
This is... Ugh.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up with his final murder and the one that he did, thank fuck, get caught for. Sadly, there are so many unidentified victims, though, as I said.
Do we even know a number?
They estimate 100.
Wow.
But could be more, honestly, because he went...
I have no idea. They're probably just almost guessing.
Yep, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
100 people, that's crazy.
Yep, little boys, too. Not even just... Yeah. Okay, so finally we move into the 1930s, and there's a break in the case for Fish. And it happens because of his abduction and murder of Grace Budd. Okay, so Grace Budd is the little sister of a young man, Edward Budd, who is looking for employment. And he places Edward, who's about 18, young man, places an ad for work in the paper. And Fish responded to that ad as if he was a farmer that could hire the boy for work. So he goes to the address. It's on 15th Street in Manhattan. And it's the Budd home. And he initially goes there to rape and abduct Edward. But Fish realizes, oh shit, he's too young and spry. There's no way I could overpower him and
He's probably
abduct
getting
him.
up in age at this point, right?
Yeah.
Do you know how old he is?
He'd probably be 40s, 50s, I'd say.
And do we know how old Edward is?
18 or 19. So
okay.
You know, a young, strong chap.
But yeah, it could be tall and built. Okay.
Yeah, and so upon seeing that, it's reported that he changed his mind and was like, nah, I'll come back. But the reason he came back, sickening, was because the parents had, invited him over to eat a meal with him because they were going to be employing their son. So they thought, or he was going to be employing their son. He sees little Grace Bud. She's 8 years old. And he lures her in with candy and saying how beautiful she is and what a nice smile she is. And so he comes back on on a secondary follow-up to have dinner with the family, with the guys that he's going to employ Edward, the son. He really decides that he wants to abduct little Grace. And he does. He convinces the parents that he has a birthday party for a niece. Oh, and by the way, can I bring Grace with me? She'd love it. She'd have a great time. And to Mrs. Bud's credit, she says she's very like, hell no, hell no.
Yeah.
But the dad was like, he wanted the son to get a job. So it's like, you can't turn down his employer.
What a terrible situation to be in.
They say yes to the little girl going to this birthday party that doesn't exist.
What an awful predicament to put the parents in.
Yeah. Terrible.
Because you would never forgive yourself.
Oh, I know.
And then I'm sure the mom never forgave the husband, and
yeah, it's pretty awful. So obviously he never returns by 9 p.m. with Grace as he promised, and he not only murders her but eats her body and writes a very disturbing confession letter to the family.
What?
In gross detail about how he cooked her and how it tasted. I will spare us those details, but I will share them on our sources.
But you did this multiple times beforehand, right? This isn't a first-time offense.
Right. There was a little boy he did this to as well, Scott Gruff, that he did that to as well. And there's 2 letters that he writes in grave, disgusting detail about how he murdered, played, and prepared their bodies.
Wow. Gosh.
Yeah.
I'm speechless. This is so disgusting and sad, and I don't really have the correct words to say.
Yeah, it's pretty sick. So, unfortunately, they were unable to find Fish for a little while after Grace's disappearance.
I'm kind of surprised. Do you think he just got to the point where he thought he'd get away with anything?
Yes, and he says that actually in his
because that seems really
words.
like, what was it, organized and disorganized? Like he didn't really think through the fact that he went. The family saw him not only once for a minute, but they had dinner with him, so they're going to recall what he looks like.
Exactly. So maybe, yeah, and he was abused, which was part of the disorganized category, right, by his own family, which was on that side of the list. They finally catch him because he reportedly went back to his tenement, or boarding house, is what they called it. And there was, thank God, a landlady who ratted him out because Fish would always come back to the apartment to get his rent check from his son, because his son would like basically subsidize his rent checks for him. And so the landlady called police and was like, hey, yo, Fish is still here. Come now, y'all. And so...
Can you imagine how much your heart...
Oh my God.
How terrified you would be?
It'd be awful.
To even be around his presence would be scary.
Oh, hell yeah. Especially knowing that he's capable of such horrific things. Ugh. So they find him and they get him. And reportedly the detective's like, I got you now, motherfucker. Well, they didn't say motherfucker. I got you now.
I hope it says something worse than I've got you now.
Yeah, it was a little like 1930s, eh? I got you now, see? But in the clip I watched of that. But anyway, they got him. Thank fuck. He goes on trial on March 11th, 1935. This is for the murder of Grace Budd. Not any of the other unknown victims, but at least he...
It's a long time he was doing this.
Yeah, decades.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you said he was born in late 1800s, and he probably started doing this around, I'm assuming,
when he was like 20.
Yeah, that's a long time.
19, actually probably like 18, 19, 20. Yeah. And that's when he would do like the sex work, and then he would, you know, have depraved sex, and then he would be abducting little boys in the street throughout Manhattan.
I bet it's the number's way above 100.
Yeah, probably is. And there were reports of other girls as well. 2 girls being beaten and hung, but they were never attributed to him, even though they were never attributed to him because there wasn't enough evidence to convict him for those. But he did like say it in his confessions.
Okay.
So he goes on trial. The night before the trial, he evidently found a chicken bone from his broth and sharpened it so much that he began to stab himself repeatedly. The guard heard him, and it was reported as a suicide attempt. However, they really think it was actually a way for him, now knowing how depraved he is, that it wasn't a suicide attempt, but rather a way to satisfy his sick sexual needs.
Ugh.
Yeah. So it was a 10-day trial. He seemed very indifferent the whole time. He had no interest in what was going on. Yet, to your case in point earlier, he went for the legal insane defense. And the prosecution really tried to go for that and said that he pleaded insanity because he heard voices from God telling him to kill the children. Even though several psychiatrists testified about his sexual fetishes, including corpophilia, urophilia, pedophilia, masochism. They also disagreed, though, the psychiatrists and experts disagreed that even despite these disgusting behaviors, he was not legally insane. His defense attorney also tried to claim that the cannibalism issue was a central part of the insanity defense, and he was trying to say that eating a person would be something that no sane person would do. But thankfully, he was unsuccessful in establishing that.
Oh, good. Nothing's good about this story.
Yeah, no, it's pretty awful. So his defense attorney even put several of Fish's children on the stand who testify about this bizarre behavior.
Oh, his poor children.
I know.
Can you imagine learning that was your father?
No. Fuck no.
There's no coming back from that.
No. Mm-mm.
Ugh, to even, be blood related to him, that's,
so awful. They also testified, the children, again, that he was a good father who always provided for them and never physically abused them, despite his depravities, again, and disgusting, horrific violence and acts against others. Finally,
I wonder if they knew the scope of how evil he was.
The kids, it doesn't seem like it, to be honest, in everything that I read.
At the moment of trial, they might have not known.
Right.
And they might not even thought he was guilty at that point.
Oh, the kids, yeah. They didn't really say much other than that they didn't think that he was a bad father.
Yeah, I wonder how old they were at that point too.
That's a great question.
Because they might have been older, because because people tend to have kids pretty young then.
Right.
So they might have been young adults.
Testifying, yeah, probably by that time.
I'm sure they had a sense. Because he seems like such an evil person. How would you not pick that up if you were living with him?
Right.
I feel like you had to have some kind of sense. He was not... Well, they knew he wasn't right in the head, it sounds like.
Yeah. So again, Fish appeared indifferent as all this debate was going on to whether or not he was insane or not. But at one point, he told his attorney that he did not want to die because God said, there's still work for me to do. Ultimately, that didn't work, nor did the insanity plea, and he was sentenced to death on January 16th, 1937, with his hands clasped in prayer via the electric chair.
I feel like that wasn't enough of a punishment.
I don't think so either, but it's reported that because of all the needles in his dick, that there was blue flames coming out.
What? Oh my!
That was probably sensationalized.
Yeah, I think that's sensationalized. But
yeah, but those were reports.
Oh.
I didn't get into necessarily the cannibalism or his taunting letters of the family because they're pretty fucking horrific. Again, I'll put them on our site for the sources, but he was a horrible, horrible human being.
I don't think horrible is even a strong enough word, but I don't know if there is a word strong enough in the dictionary to describe that type of person.
I don't think there is either. And
seems like he's like a demon.
The way he claimed to become a cannibal, by the way, is one of his lovers had a trip to China, And during that time in the late 1870s, early 1900s, there was a huge famine in China. And so the lover claimed that the Chinese people would murder and eat their children to stay alive, and went on this crazy rant about how sweet human flesh tasted. And that made Albert go like, okay, from here on out, that's what I'm going to do. He was convinced he needed to try human flesh. And so he did. And the other thing I forgot to mention was that he, with his children, would kind of, what do you call it? Not practice, but sample. He'd start out the cannibalism by eating raw meat and forcing his children to eat raw meat. And then he escalated to human flesh, obviously. It's not ever been corroborated whether or not this lover existed or if he made it up to.
I think he made it up.
Right, to justify
he doesn't seem like anything about him is sane.
So that's kind of part of the if you will, even though the kid said he was a good dad, that's part of the torment he put his children through. But that is the, again, horrific, awful, dark story of Albert Fish.
Oh, glad that one's over.
The end.
That was too much for me, to be honest.
I'm sorry. I was trying to warn you, and you're like, yeah, I get it.
I've listened to true crime before, but that was a whole nother level.
Have you ever heard of him before?
No. I wish I hadn't, honestly.
Well, it's interesting that both ours had the supernatural tie and were sentenced to death. Isn't that... I don't know.
Yeah, but I think yours was on... I mean, mine was awful, but yours was on another level.
Oh, yeah. Because it includes not only the rape and murder, but the cannibalism and God knows probably necrophilia. I mean...
If we have anyone still listening at this point.
Sorry, you guys. I tried warning.
If they are listening, most people are like, I had to turn off.
Turn this shit off. Well, I have nothing else to close on because that was so awful. And
I think we should end somehow on a positive note.
Okay.
Though.
Let's see. It's a long weekend, and what are you doing this weekend, Ames, for fun?
Actually, tomorrow will be a lot of fun. I'm going to my parents' house, and my dad got like this fancy pizza oven, and we're gonna make homemade pizzas, and then Corey got a homemade ice cream maker, and we made this bomb-ass ice cream.
I'm so jelly. I want it.
It sounds weird, but if anyone's from Ohio or Columbus area, you would know Jenny's.
Oh,
and we
yeah.
got her recipe book, and it's goat cheese with roasted cherries, and it's...
No, that actually sounds kind of good.
It's bomb. It's amazing. We made it last weekend, but I'm trying to be like healthy, so I'm only having like once a week. So I've been counting down the days till I can have this ice cream again.
I love it.
And that is my positivity. Oh, and I'm planning on going several hikes. Probably one tomorrow, South Mountain, then hopefully Carefree Sunday, and then we'll see. I don't know. I want to go on a lot of hikes while I can. While the weather's nice.
You should. I'm gonna. I want to go to Dreamy's Drop, but it's still closed because it's like right by my apartment. But
oh, nice. Yeah, I've done that one before. It's a good one.
Yeah, it's light and easy, and I'm not ready for anything intense. Clearly, at this moment.
Yeah.
Let's see. Positive for me. I got the house to myself. Both houses, my apartment and my parents' house. So yay.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that we found some positivity, and I think next week we definitely need to do a lighthearted episode.
We're gonna lift it up next week, y'all. Because
I think it's one thing to listen to true crime, and it's another thing to write it and research it.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of maybe why I chose mine, because there wasn't as many details of, not saying it wasn't horrific, but it was kind of like he shot them, end of story.
Mm-hmm.
Where yours is like this drawn out torture.
Yes.
That's why I saw a few on the list, and I was like, those would be very interesting, and I'm sure very popular people to cover, but I don't know if mentally I can handle researching them.
Yeah.
Because even like when you're reading it and looking at pictures, or if you're Googling it, who knows what you're going to stumble upon. Yeah. That's like when you open the Pandora's box for what I'm going to find. So I guess what I found out tonight, the lesson is...
A, that I have a problem with true crime, and B...
Well, also, I was not cut for covering murder. I know some people, that's what they do every week, and I don't think I have it in me to cover it.
Yeah, that sounds good to me because I don't think I do either.
Because it's too dark.
Even though I consume it, I don't think I could read it and write about it.
Okay, I have an assignment for you.
Yes.
And you can't say like last week or 2 weeks ago, I'm going to watch it, I'm watching, you're not going to do it.
Okay, which one? Goop?
No, don't listen to Murder every night.
Oh, okay. All right.
What about we limit to 3 times a week? Why don't you try to do something?
Can we do 4?
You got a problem. Why you, like, don't you, I feel like there's enough dark shit out there in the world that you don't need to consume so many moments of your life with other dark stuff.
But I like it.
But maybe that's sometimes why you feel down.
You're probably right, dude.
I mean, they say, like I said earlier, it's like who you surround yourself with, what you listen to.
No, you're not wrong, my
so
friend.
maybe sometimes when you're feeling sad, maybe you should think about...
Take a look at my listen history.
Yeah, that might be why you... And also, I also think that has to do a little bit with why at the beginning if you think people are so terrible because you listen to this stuff all the time.
Oh, girl.
Yeah, maybe you should try to consume some stuff of people doing good things. It might get
capable of goodness.
You might realize that the world ain't that bad.
Oh, it's not. It's not. But I think inherently we're shitty. That's the difference.
I think a little bit that you need to cut back your addiction.
All right. I will work on that.
We'll see. We'll follow up and she'll probably be like... She'll
listen to everything. No.
She'll probably will lie to us. Let's just say that.
I don't know. I'll have to get into the why I like it.
I wouldn't like to listen to it either if I lived by myself.
And that has started to freak me out a little.
Yeah, because I remember I tried to listen to... Why am I drawing a blank? The Golden State Killer.
Oh, yeah.
So I started listening to a podcast one night and I was just like chilling, hanging out at my house. And Corey was out, I think at band practice or something. I was like 15 minutes and I turned it off because every little noise in the house... So I don't know how you do it living alone, listening to that stuff.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with me. It's progressed, I'd have to say.
I feel like, yeah, living alone, especially at nighttime, and you just bought a new place, that would make me creeped out.
Yeah, I listened to it every night when I was basically alone anyway, every night back then. But I feel like...
Well, you gotta explain what you mean by that.
Oh, basically my ex was never home, so I had an empty bed to myself every fucking night. Which now I love. It's wonderful.
Well, she got that Nectar life.
Sure do.
If anyone's looking for a good mattress and no, we're not making money. So
I was about to say, sponsor us, Nectar, if you're listening.
We're already we've already discussed this, but I got a Nectar mattress. It was the best life decision. Then Krista got one. Then my sister got one. If you lay on this thing, it's like you melt in it.
You really do.
That is a positive note, too.
It's such a positive
Owning
note.
a Nectar will make you very happy.
I can't fucking wait to go lie down in it with the dogs right now. Like, I don't even want to drive home, but I'm driving home just for that mattress.
My drive's way longer than yours.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But I've driven home from your house many nights late. So, anywho... We are going to have a good weekend. I'm going to try to limit my addiction problem. And peace be witches.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to say peace, but have a good night or good morning. I don't know if there's any... Almost. Do I feel any peace out there? I don't know.
You don't?
Yes, I do. I just feel like that episode put me in a dark spiral. Okay. I'll be okay, everyone. Don't worry.
We hope you find peace.
Yeah, that's a good way to end it.
Bye, guys.